Hello, Hunters. Autobot Dawson here, ready to roll out something extremely new and different for you. I am going to be starting a podcast with the help of my amazing Last Wolfpack clanmates, and the setting for the podcast, as you can see on your screens, is none other than the Spicy Ramen Shop in the tower in Destiny. So yes, you guessed it, this is a Destiny-themed podcast. So joining me today in the Spicy Ramen Shop podcast debut episode is someone you should be very familiar with by now, Nate. Say hello, Nate.
How's it going?
All right. So basically, we've neither one of us have ever done something like this before, but we're just gonna jump in and do the best we can with it. Hopefully, you guys enjoy it. If you do, what would really be extremely helpful is subscribing and then commenting down below, just any comment, because any kind of constructive criticism on the podcast would be great, but also just letting me know that you were engaged with this content will let me know that it's worth doing more podcasts in the future. So there we go. So today, I figure for our debut episode, the best thing to talk about would be something very with the times, which is the reprisal of the King's Fall raid in Destiny. As you all know, if you've watched the channel at all, I am a King's Fall fanboy. Nate and the other guys actually, it's kind of a running joke how much I love Oryx. And, we've just really went after King's Fall. We've done King's Fall every week this year as a clan, or this season as a clan. So, Nate, what are your general thoughts on King's Fall as a raid? I mean, would you say that it's one of the better raids or a raid that you don't like so much?
Well, I definitely think it's one of the best raids. I don't know if it's my favorite one. I think it's definitely the one that introduced the most mechanics. Like, it's the pinnacle of mechanics that it did in Destiny. I know when D1 came out, it was in D1, it was very, I like how it worked with the story at the time. That's the problem I have with most raids, is they don't really work directly with the story. Yeah, I like King's Fall. I think it may be my second favorite.
I know you love Deepstone Crypt.
Yeah, I really like Deepstone Crypt. I have not played it in a long time, but I like Wrath of the Machine.
I'm definitely excited for them to bring that one back. So to touch on a point that you made about story, that's actually fantastic that you brought that up. Because that is actually one of the key things that I absolutely love about King's Fall, is that, before we start talking about the reprised version, of course, that we got this season, what Nate's alluding to, for those who may not know, is that in 2015, right, Destiny was at a crossroads. Year one was rough at best for most people. I mean, we were all having fun because we were just kids in high school. Experiencing this game was nothing like anything we had seen before. But critic-wise, Destiny was not doing so hot. And the Taken King was just this all-encompassing event that promised to revive the game, and it delivered on that. The amount of changes the expansion brought was unbelievable. I remember we were so hyped that summer leading up to Taken King, and King's Fall, like Nate was talking about.
That's where they introduced the new subclasses.
Exactly.
That was the same season as the new subclasses.
Exactly. And to Nate's point, King's Fall as a raid was the end of the story. You fought Oryx in the campaign, right? And as you defeated him, he teleported away and laughed at you. And we were all like, okay, what's that about? Of course, not to dive too deep into lore, but basically the very, very quick abridged version of why that is because very powerful Ascendant Hive have to be given what's called a true death in their Ascendant realm. So the raid takes place in the Ascendant realm of Oryx's Dreadnought. And so we're facing his true version. And, it is interesting that no other raid, I mean, Crota a little bit, but really other than those two which are linked, no other raid has really had a direct tie to the campaign. And I do think that's one of the strongest points about King's Fall, because when it came out, it really felt like we were concluding that story in a big way, because we're fighting this massive 100-foot, god. And it just truly felt like the power fantasy of Destiny has never been more real than right there. Like, absolutely. The ability to kill such a massive, powerful creature was really just unmatched at the time, and one of the reasons that I was hooked on it. And you also mentioned, Nate, that it was sort of the pinnacle of mechanics in Destiny raids. I definitely think that's true, because Vault of Glass was the first raid, and I mean, it had some mechanics, but
you ultimately it was shoot gun kill boss.
Yeah, exactly.
And Oryx, you have to detonate bombs to do any damage whatsoever.
Exactly, which was a huge departure. And then you get Crota, the second raid, was even less mechanic heavy than Vault of Glass. I mean, it was very straightforward.
It was just basically shoot Gallahorn at his shield so you could do sword damage, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So then you have King's Fall coming in. Not only is it the longest raid at the time, and still to this day, it has the most encounters tied with Last Wish, unless you count Queen's Walk, which would put it a little bit shorter than Last Wish. But at this point, you can one-phase so many of the Last Wish bosses, I really don't think it's longer. And so it's a very lengthy raid, but every single encounter is quite mechanics heavy. And I think that's why some people love it and some people don't.
Yeah.
So let's just kind of go through one encounter at a time here and briefly touch on what was changed, if anything, and kind of what we think of the encounter. So they didn't change anything about the initial Court of Oryx ball encounter or the jump puzzle. But in general, what do you think about that initial ball encounter?
I mean, it's all right. It's not my most favorite thing. I understand the lore reference for it and like why it's the way it is. Entertaining wise, it's all right. But
yeah, I think that's.
Story wise, it makes sense because you're trying to go into his realm.
Exactly. I think that's a perfect summary. It's a nice setting for the first part. Being back in the Court of Oryx, especially in D2 after all these years, was very nostalgic and cool. The ball encounter, I would put it somewhere in the middle of opening raid encounters. It's far from the worst, but it's definitely not the best opening either. It's a little boring, but it at least has something going on rather than just drive your sparrow, or the Val the Disciple intro is atrocious with the boat. That one is terrible.
The boat.
Yeah, so it's better than that, but probably not as strong as the opening and some of the other raids. Like I really think Vault of Glass's opening is really strong. And, Last Wish doesn't even mess around. It just puts you straight in a boss fight, so that's pretty good. But yeah, so, okay, and then moving on from there, I think one of the highlights of the raid, and I don't know if this is just me being a sucker for a good view or what, but to me, one of the highlights of the raid is that Tomb Ship jump puzzle immediately following that first encounter.
I really like that. I think it's very ambient, and it's got a really good skybox in it, and like I don't understand why they don't do more of that stuff. Like one of the examples of like when they nailed something like that was like the red Siva room
in Wrath.
Yeah, in Wrath. Like that just kind of massive scale stuff makes it more enjoyable to do. Like especially repeatable.
Yes, I completely agree.
Like Riven, for example, it's like there's nothing really like grandiose about it.
Which is ironic. Like, you would think with it, and that's always been, for those who may not know, I kind of have a hot take on Riven. I know the community, especially other streamers and stuff, which, far from a full-time streamer, I'm a full-time worker. A lot of streamers have the opinion that Last Wish is the best raid, and I just simply don't get it because of exactly what Nate's saying. To me, atmosphere is one of the most, if not the most important thing in a raid. And the problem with Last Wish is that it's in the Dreaming City. You're literally slaying the last Ahamkara, so you would think that it would have all these amazing sights, but for some reason, it just doesn't stack up. The skybox in the Tomb Ship jump puzzle that Nate is talking about, I think it is breathtaking. Really. It is... Being in open space like that is just gorgeous. Saturn looks incredible from there. And also, do yourself a favor, Guardians. Next time you're in that jump puzzle, right? Give yourself a moment throughout the jump puzzle to just look up and take in the large scope of the room that you are in, because the portico room where it takes place is meant to be like Oryx's fleet, right? Like that's the Tomb Ship fleet. They're all getting ready for battle, essentially. That's where they dock. You know, it's like a port. And just seeing how massive the architecture is around it, it really puts you in that mindset of we are going to slay this king, this god, because only such a powerful king would have access to such a large, grand fleet, you know, and it's just the entrance to the main part of the raid, which is in that puzzle, is just beautiful. I think it's got a really well-placed secret box. It's interactive. It's a lot of fun to do the jump puzzle with your friends because you're just going from ship to ship, and like Nate was saying, I mean, it really holds up well. I mean, I would put it up there with the Red Room in Wrath and the obviously the open space part of Deepstone Crypt as really the three most beautiful.
That's really cool.
Yes, I mean, I think those are the most beautiful parts of any raid right there.
The problem I have with Wish is I don't know what they like. I guess I understand it's the environment, but Last Wish is so like saturated looking. It like takes like the color and the vibrancy out of it to me.
Yeah.
It just doesn't look necessarily as pretty as it could.
I agree with that. It doesn't look nearly as sci-fi either, and I think like King's Fall is like this nice blend of sci-fi and like horror sort of mixed in there, and it
sci-fi horror, yeah.
Yeah, and it really creates a really cool atmosphere. So we're definitely a fan of that jump puzzle. I've caught myself dying in the jump puzzle because I'm too busy taking screenshots. So it's good fun. And moving on from there, we sort of start getting into the actual meat of the raid. So we have the Glyphs encounter, also known as the Basilica encounter. So as we go through these encounters, you guys, what we're going to do is we're not going to, this isn't necessarily a guide. It's more like we're just talking about the raid. So we're sort of going to discuss what changed, whether or not we like the encounter, and then we're going to briefly discuss what the challenges around it are. So getting into it, the main thing that changed from Destiny 1 with the Glyphs encounter is that now whenever you go down to the plate, you have to actually pick up the brand claimer so that you can steal the brand from the person on the plate, and that's how you start the cycle. And to do that, you have to take out a wizard and a knight on a balcony, and you've got to be really quick about it in the middle. So it's a small change, but it was quite impactful. I felt like this encounter was a lot harder in Destiny 2 than Destiny 1.
I definitely feel like we died to it more. Out of all the encounters, I think we died to this one the most.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And
I don't know if it's really necessarily it's hard. I mean, it's definitely difficult, but if you're not good at managing ad control, like which some of our clan is not, you can get overwhelmed very easily.
Yep, it'll show. And then you go down to the plate, and if you've got a weak link, you go down to the plate for your turn, and you've got like 30 ads alive.
Yeah.
And loadout recommendations, just real quick for you guys. Gjallarhorn or Thunderlord both do incredible work in this room. Seriously.
I always say, especially for that room, don't be scared to use your heavy because there's not a boss.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you might as well use it.
Nate is absolutely right. The key is to take out the knights on the balcony as soon as they spawn. I mean, the second they spawn, take them out.
I just Thunderlord them every time.
You do also have one unstoppable champion that spawns in the middle. He'll spawn 3 different times in the encounter. On Master Mode, there will be an unstoppable ogre in the middle, left, and right that'll spawn at the same time for a total of 9 unstoppables. For this season, if you're watching it in Season of Plunder, it's Unstoppable Pulse, Unstoppable Shotgun are the best choices. But, in future seasons, whatever the artifact mod is, take advantage of it, take out the ogres. It's important that you kill them right when they spawn because they will very quickly ruin your run.
And make sure they jump out first.
Yeah, exactly. Unstops can be so glitchy, especially the ogre. So one really interesting thing is the challenge mode on this one. So we're not going to necessarily go over this in great detail, but I do want to touch on it. So for every encounter, there is what I call a Kingslayer challenge, which is a challenge that's a secret that's not a secret, but rather an additional challenge required for you to get the seal that will not actually tell you challenge failed, whatever in the corner. So you have to ensure you're doing it right. And then there's the actual challenge that grants double loot. Okay, so the Kingslayer challenge, or the bonus challenge for this encounter, is that whenever you pass the brand, you cannot be standing near a plate. So this is very easy. Our team has actually started doing it this way all the time because it's genuinely easier and it saves you time. Basically, rather than have countdown timers out loud, as soon as you on the plate see your teammate coming down for middle, just run off the plate and meet each other. If you meet each other, it saves time and it completes that challenge. Boom, you're one step closer to Kingslayer's seal, which I am very happy to have earned this season. And in addition to that, you can complete the actual weekly challenge when it rotates at the same time, because all that challenge is simply you can't go to the same plate twice in a row. So if you go right first, then the next time you go to middle, you're going to go left, and so forth and so on. So right goes to left and left goes to right, and you just keep rotating. It actually doesn't really dramatically change the encounter. I felt like this challenge was pretty straightforward. I mean, what do you think about that one?
I mean, I don't think it really hurts the team either way. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, it's nice to get more, but I mean, I still get just as much as, if not more, doing it the new way we do it. Because again, I just underlord everything and get all the ad kills.
Exactly. So it's pretty straightforward challenges on that one, you guys. So definitely get your Harrowed loot when it's that weak. I will say this encounter is a nightmare on Master because you cannot carry someone, right? Like, everyone has got to hold their own weight because 3 unstoppable ogres spawn at the same time. So if you're on the plate, tough luck. You got to take that ogre out. So requires a little more work on Master, but on normal, it's just the 1 unstoppable ogre. Not a whole lot to worry about. And then as we move through the raid, that's the only champion in normal mode. So our next encounter is War Priest, and
I wonder, why do they do that? I don't understand that.
The one I don't know either. I don't know. It doesn't make sense.
Like, what's the benefit?
So as we get into War Priest here, this was a very controversial encounter this time around because in Destiny 2, this guy has got some health. Now, if you remember, Nate, we got that week 1 clear. This guy did not go down easy week 1.
Oh, we had to come back?
Yep. We had someone who was a little low on their power level, and we had to absolutely, rotate someone else from the clan in for that because this guy has a ton of health now. It's not so bad now because later in the season, everybody's power level's higher. We consistently two-phase him now. But
that's still saying something, two-phasing him.
Exactly, yeah. First week, he was definitely, you needed all 4 phases. So again, we'll quickly summarize this. War Priest stayed mostly the same, but one key change that made it quite harder. Rather than when you have the brand after doing the glyph sequence, instead of having to kill an ad to extend your timer, someone has to use the brand claimer buff, like from the last encounter, to actually manually steal the brand from you. They do that by killing knights that spawn on the 2 sides that the initial brand claimer was not on. So whichever plate is last in the glyph sequence will not get a knight. The other 2 will. So you have to assign 2 people from your team to take care of knights pick up that claimer, announce the timer out loud, and switch it that way. It's not a big change, but it is a change, and it does actually change sort of the whole way that you do this encounter. We really recommend standing for DPS somewhat in the middle every time and just moving to the glyphs when it's time for the big storm that wipes you. We found that was actually much better for damage. I mean, our damage has went up tremendously since we started using that strategy.
It's just the jumping will make or break you, basically.
Yep, so you got to be careful on left. If you get lucky and you don't need left, that's ideal. So for the 2 challenges on this one, the Kingslayer challenge is nobody can hold the brand until everyone else has. So you can't hold the brand twice until all 6 people on your team has. After that, it doesn't matter. So this is pretty straightforward. It just means you're going to have to rotate who kills knights every round. And make sure that you switch who stands on the plates every round as well. Just for 2 rounds. And then the actual double loot challenge, Devious Thievery. This one can be a little tough because it's a bit buggy sometimes. But basically, whenever you pick up the brand claimer, you have to then pick up the brand within 5 seconds. So what you want to do is not pick up the actual brand claimer until your timer is already at 5 seconds or less, very low, so that you still maximize your DPS. And it's actually not a hard challenge, but it's just getting used to not picking up as soon as you kill the knight, that sort of thing. Nate, do you have any further thoughts on War Priest? I mean, he's mostly the same. It's just a standard Destiny boss fight for sure for a raid.
I don't think War Priest is hard. I just think he's very damage gated.
Yes, he's very tanky. If you have weak links on your team in terms of DPS, it'll show.
The hard part was when you had to do damage on left for the final encounter. Then some people just don't know how to jump.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. And that's what will get you killed 9 times out of 10 in this encounter for sure. Definitely linear fusion rifles are the way to go for pretty much the whole rest of the raid. A divinity certainly doesn't hurt here, but isn't required by any means.
We just use it every time.
Exactly. It's just, use it while it's good. Use it while it's good. Next season, Tether may be the better option. So, moving on from the War Priest, we've got Golgroth's Maze is, I believe, unchanged from Destiny 1. But again, I do think this is a really great, not really a puzzle room. I mean, there is the puzzle for the chests with the plates. But I do think it's a great atmosphere setter. It definitely sets the tone because you're kind of walking through this pitch black area. Feels very creepy. You know something dangerous is on the other side of this puzzle, That's kind of how I felt about it.
Yeah.
So once you get into the room for Golgoroth had basically one key change, which was that the Tablet of Ruin now increases not when people die, but instead when you don't use every one of the pools for damage. So that means you can no longer use the one pull strat or you will wipe, and you want to make sure that people are taking the gaze properly so that you can get all your DPS in. Our team has found that Golgoroth is quite easy, maybe the easiest part of the raid.
Yeah, I've definitely felt they could have added maybe more. I don't know. They could have added something different to make him more challenging. You know more about the challenge mode than I do, but it's like it's just not. I kind of wonder if we found it easy because we're used to it, especially from D1.
It could be.
Because I mean, it is not a simple fight per se. I mean, there's a lot of I would say item management going on, knocking down the pools, shifting gaze. The main thing is Golgoroth sometimes can have a glitchy gaze.
That's true. And you're right, Nate. There are a lot of moving parts. I mean, for a new raid team, yeah, I think this encounter could be a nightmare because you do have the pools, which you have to stand in for damage. When you're in the pool, you have to watch your screen for the debuff that blows everybody up if you're not careful, the unstable light. You have 2 people on the outside that are actually taking the gaze, managing timer, killing Axion darts, and then the team in the bottom's having to move while managing ads. There is a lot going on. He does go down pretty quick if you use linear fusion rifles. as for the challenge modes for him, the Kingslayer challenge is very similar to the War Priest one. Everybody has to take the gaze during every single damage phase. This can definitely be tough, I think, for some people, because you got so many people on your team who are not used to taking the gaze. But we did get it done. My advice would be to try to assign everybody a number 1 through 6, and then try to put the weaker members of your team in the first 3 and the stronger members of your team in the last 3. Just so that they can get everything out of the way, And I don't mean weaker in an offensive way. I mean weaker in that they usually aren't the person doing the mechanic-heavy portions of the raids. A little less experienced, perhaps. Now, the other challenge, the double loot challenge, is very odd on this one. It basically is just whenever the gaze is switched, the person who currently has the gaze has to be standing in a pool of light. So the basic strategy for this is the people doing damage want to move to the second pool when there's 5 seconds left so that the person with gaze can stand in the old pool for just like a split second while the other person takes the gaze. That's pretty much the strategy. It's not very difficult. It's just a little awkward. So yeah, Nate, what are where would you put Golgoroth? Do you like the Golgoroth fight? Do you think I think it's a really well done raid boss because of all the moving parts, and it does feel satisfying when you're doing it.
I like it. I just don't think it's like crazy. I mean, if you want to transition, I kind of feel that the same way with Daughters as well. Golgoroth and Daughters, to me, aren't really like. They don't give like the wow factor. Like, yes, I finally. It's like they're not high stake. Like War Priest, it feels like you really accomplished something when you beat the War Priest because War Priest has got such a heavy health pool, and you're just doing damage over and over again. Golgoroth, you're down there in the pit with him, and it doesn't. To me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like why he couldn't just stomp you, I guess. But I understand that he's got the gaze mechanic and everything. But there's just something. It's not as big of a wow factor to me. That's what I'll put it as.
I think that's true. That definitely makes a lot of sense. I do think the War Priest definitely, in Destiny 2 at least, feels like a lot more of a challenge, to say the least. Moving on from there, we go into the next jump puzzle, the evil wall of moving parts, and I don't know what you're thinking. And there's another secret box in here. Not really a lot to discuss here. I think it's a cool room. It definitely is a moment for a lot of funnies. Like I know that Jacob and Nate always try to shoulder charge me off the map. I really appreciate that. And it's a good time for laughs because you're gonna have that one person on your team that can't jump, and all 5 people are gonna be waiting at the door, and then you just see this 6th guy get knocked by the walls over and over again, and it's pretty entertaining to see.
Actually, that's one of the most nostalgic parts of the raid because I remember that so much because it's just I guess we died to it the most, and like when we first saw it, it was unexpected. It's just very nostalgic, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely was feeling the nostalgia in that room. That room, the Tomb Ship room, and Oryx's room were the 3 places that I was really feeling the nostalgia in this. And it is very nostalgia heavy, you guys. If you played this raid in Destiny 1 and you haven't done it yet in Destiny 2, do it. Because the enhanced graphics mixed with the familiar setting, you are going to have a blast. I mean, it is a very fun, adrenaline-packed adventure. I would say that the which we'll get to Oryx and Daughters in a minute, but the overarching theme of the Destiny 2 revamp to King's Fall was they took what I thought was already a brilliant raid, and they took its one flaw that people had, which was that sometimes it was a little boring because there wasn't so much action going on with the mechanics. There was a lot of sort of standstill. And they changed that because the brand claimer mixed in there, and then with some changes we'll talk about with Oryx, it made everything much more fast-paced than it was in Destiny 1. So they elevated the raid even higher than it already was. I think the changes were all really positive for that reason. And it just makes the raid a stronger experience overall. So as we climb up the jump puzzle, Everybody's had their laughs. We enter the final boss room. And in that final boss room, we have 2 boss fights, of course. Starting with the Daughters of Oryx. Now, I'll quickly touch on the challenges on this one. There's not a lot to discuss here. The main change is that instead of, and this change also is for Oryx, instead of 1 round of 3 people getting on plates, or rather, instead of 1 round of 4 people getting on plates, it's 3 rounds of 2 people getting on plates per phase, which I think makes this a lot more enjoyable. It's a lot more engaging because everybody's having to get involved. People are getting taken at random. There's a lot more call-outs, but it's also less frustrating because, the jump puzzle section isn't so long. So if you get somebody on your team that's taken that's bad at jumping, it's no longer a really difficult jumping section. Like, it's pretty straightforward.
Like D1 was bad.
Exactly. So the challenges are pretty simple. Common misconception about the actual double loot challenge. People interpret what it says as they have to be on a different plate during every run. That's actually not true. You can actually do this encounter completely normally and complete the double loot challenge, as long as you make sure that you don't accidentally get off your plate while the runner is running. That's it. Just don't get off the plate while the runner is running, which you shouldn't do anyway, and you will complete that challenge. Very, very easy. The easiest challenge, for sure. It was the one I had the easiest time with in Master Mode as well. Because, of course, you do have to complete every challenge in Master Mode for the title. The other challenge was really fun. It was called The Floor is Lava, and it was very much The Floor is Lava. That was a lot of fun when we did that together. Basically, nobody's feet can touch the ground when you're a taken player. So because you get taken at random, we basically made it to where nobody's feet can touch the ground because you want to make sure that you're not the one who messes it up. Especially because, like we were mentioning, that bonus challenges, the Kingslayer challenges, they don't actually tell you when you fail the challenge because it's just something you have to be aware of. So to play it extra safe, just make sure that when you're walking around your plate that you use the 4 little side platforms to run around and that you jump all the way to middle and then all the way to the plate when you're taking it. It's easier than it sounds, but it was a lot of fun to do the encounter that way. And on paper, it seems impossible, but it's actually not too bad. Just pay attention to the ground and make sure your feet don't touch it. So, Nate, that's really the only change they had on Daughters was the way the plates changed. Not really a lot to say here. Linear fusion rifles are king once again. Divinity is, I would say, close to a requirement on this part unless you really want to take forever because they will flinch the crap out of you while you're doing damage.
Well, they also, I don't know if you've seen it, they recently changed linear fusion rifles a little bit. They're better under flinch now in PvE.
Oh, yes, that's correct. That's true.
I've not tried it since then, but who knows?
Yeah, so maybe we don't need div, but it certainly wouldn't hurt if you do have somebody on your team with it. But I do want to state throughout this raid, don't listen to what you hear necessarily on YouTube, unless it's from this channel, of course, because, the truth is, people say, oh, Divinity's a necessity, but it's really not, okay? There's not a raid encounter in this game.
Well, to be honest, most people don't have Divinity.
Exactly, and
that raid came at a time when not a lot of people were playing, especially people now.
It's not a popular raid.
There's been a lot of new people that play regularly more now than that were playing at that time, and that is a very hard exotic quest to get.
Exactly.
Completed.
So you absolutely do not need Divinity. If we say
Bungie designs a raid encounter where you don't need a certain weapon.
Exactly. So if you feel like you're not doing enough damage and you don't have Divinity, try other debuffs. Try Tractor Cannon. Try Tether. Try Chaining Tethers. Try Melting Point. There's plenty of different ways you can get around it. You are going to have to use a debuff for War Priest, but it doesn't mean it has to be Divinity.
Well, I will add a caveat to what you're saying. Melting Point no longer exists.
Does it really not?
Yeah, they took that away when they did Solar 3.0.
That's kind of a bummer.
Yeah, I know. It really made, it's well, that's why.
Why would they take that away?
Well, because it's the boy Titans now.
Oh, right.
Debuff people.
I got you. They have weakened now. I got you. So yeah, tether, whatever you want to use. Just make it to where the crits are easier on daughters if you can. That's just the loadout we recommend. Is Divinity and Linear Fusion Rifles will make your life easier on daughters for sure, but not necessary.
What about the first week when it was like Wardcliffe Coil?
Yes, Wardcliffe Coil and Gallahorn used to melt them, and then they patched it and said rocket launchers were accidentally doing too much damage to specifically the daughters. So, but that was fun.
We melted them with Gallahorn.
That was fun while it lasted. And so, cue the ancestral regal trumpets of doom, because you've now reached the final boss fight, Oryx the Taken King. And I don't know, it may be nostalgia, it may be that I'm a fanboy, but I think this boss fight is ingenious. I think that the mechanics that were already there, plus the subtle changes they made in Destiny 2, have made this the strongest boss fight in the game. It is perfect, in my opinion. I wouldn't change one thing about it. It is very mechanically involved, but it never feels like the mechanics are unfair or buggy or anything like that. It feels like it works smoothly. You basically have to balance calling out the right plate, doing 3 rounds of the plates. A person is taken at random. While you're doing the running, you're making sure that you're killing the ogre next to your plate and the knight across from your plate so that he doesn't kill your bomb. The brand claimer then, of course, takes the invincibility buff from the Vessel of Oryx, another moving part. Everybody goes into their bombs when Oryx does his slam. And this is the big change, right? In Destiny 1, you would first shoot Oryx's chest when he was going to clap, and that would stun him, and then you use the bombs to damage him. In Destiny 2, and this is a great change, it's reversed. Now, you first do the bombs when he's ready to clap, which stuns him, and then you damage him with weapons, which makes the encounter feel a lot more interactive and a lot more like you're actually hurting Oryx. Were you a fan of that change, Nate? Did you like that change?
Yeah, I like it. It makes it seem like it's more active, like you're more involved in it.
Exactly. And it also makes it to where you don't necessarily have to do 4 phases. Like in Destiny 1, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You had to detonate 16 bombs to kill him. If you messed up
a lot more deaths.
Exactly. And if you messed up 1 bomb, sorry about your luck, buddy. You're wiping, because Enrage has already happened by the 4th phase. So it's definitely more forgiving in Destiny 2. Technically, it's more mechanically demanding, but it's actually more forgiving, because as long as your damage is strong, you really aren't in there for too long. We pretty consistently 2-phase this boss.
I'll add this. You were talking about graphics updates a while ago. I think Oryx really benefits from that.
Oh, yes.
They changed up some of his character looks just a little bit. I think his chest is most noticeable.
It looks a lot better.
Yeah, and they lightened him up, and it made it like you can actually see the detail on him and stuff now. It looks really good.
They also made the antlers on his head a bit smaller, I think, and a little bit, they kind of tilt back instead of just like straight out. He looks a lot less goofy. And yeah, the color on him is very vibrant and cool.
I will say the biggest benefit, in my opinion, from from being in D2 is the Shadow Realm glitches are finally gone.
Oh, yes. The Shade Realm was a huge pain point in D1, because for those who don't know, after every damage phase, Oryx will either trigger bombs from the sky that you either have to avoid or kill 4 knights to end, or he will trigger the Shade Realm, where one by one he will teleport you into a realm where your health doesn't regen, and you have a certain amount of time, which is not displayed to you, to kill the Shade of Oryx, a smaller version of Oryx who's coming at you with a sword. It's a really cool concept, but the problem was in D1, you would get killed by the architects in there so much.
He would slam the ground beside you. You don't even have to be... And the way that it worked is it would bounce you off the ground, and you just hit the wall, and you'd insta-die.
Yep, and so that's pretty much completely fixed. I don't think we've ran into that once.
No, I don't think so either.
And also, can we talk about the Shade Realm looks beautiful now. It used to just be...
That is another one of the big changes.
Yes, it used to just be like smoke gray, and now it's like a light blue with gray mixed in. It looks amazing in there.
Actually has some color to it.
Yes, very vibrant. I love when he does Shade Realm. It's so cool. It's immersive because it really feels like Oryx is kind of, casting this spell and teleporting you into this different dimension. There's a lot going on in this raid encounter. There's a lot of different mechanics. From the bombs, to the vessel, to the immunity shield, to the brand claimer, to the platforms, to the clap, to the shade realm, to the time when he tries to blow you up from space and you have to kill the knights. Like, there's a lot going on, but it's all very fun. We can also mention, Nate, I think it's worth mentioning, I love the soundtrack in this room.
Yes.
Yes, it's definitely got one of the strongest soundtracks.
I like how interactive he is compared to other bosses. Like, you can actually see him slamming stuff on the ground. He slams his fist. He's actually actively attacking you, where it's like, what's Riven doing against you? Nothing, really. She opens her mouth and you shoot at her.
Yep.
It's like, even in Vault of Glass, Atheon, is he really doing anything against you? No, not really. He throws a bunch of ads against you.
Yeah, he occasionally shoots a torch hammer. That's it.
Oryx is actively trying to, like, heal you. Like, he's summoning magic to shoot at you. He's like an actual enemy that's just giant compared to you are.
Yes, and the giant brings me to my next point, which, of course, is one of the coolest... Really, I think we just have to flat out say the coolest part about King's Fall is that the shock factor when you first summon him, and you're not, like, if you're somebody who's never done the raid and you're not expecting it, you will be shocked when you summon him. He is huge.
Yeah.
He's
a big guy.
He's absolutely massive. And it's worth mentioning, you guys, now we do have some bigger bosses from time to time. We've also got bosses like Rolk that are very interactive and try to kick you and stuff like that. But
like their boss fight. That's really cool.
But this originally came out in 2015, Destiny Year 2. We had nothing like this. Like, him being that massive was a total shock to all of us. And I think, personally, in my opinion, I think it set a really high bar for what I expect out of a raid final boss that I honestly don't think they've reached since. It's not that any of the other raid final bosses are necessarily bad. It's just that in Oryx's appearance, he truly looks like someone that could actually hurt us. Our Guardians are so powerful, but Oryx has never lost that allure of there's a little bit of intimidation going in there where it's like, wow, we are really facing a cosmic-like entity here. And it was just, it's such a fun experience. And then even when you kill him, his body doesn't just disintegrate. You can actually watch it slowly fall further and further until it lands on the surface of Mars.
It calcifies.
Or Saturn. I meant Saturn, not Mars. And yes, you're right. It also crystallizes, calcifies. You can actually see his heart kind of explode. It's really cool. I mean, everyone, I think, needs to experience that boss fight. Even if you're not a raider or you don't have a raid team, comment down below, right? I'll be happy to take you through it. I will be more than happy to take you through it. It's worth the experience. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I could just be gushing here, but I really think this is one of the strongest raid bosses that they've ever done. And I think it elevates the raid. It elevates the raid to another level. It's not cheesable either, and I like that.
It's the encounter that you look forward to for that raid.
Yes, absolutely.
Like everything else is built up for it.
Absolutely. It definitely feels like payoff. So that's sort of the breakdown of the... Oh, wait, challenges. Forgot to mention challenges. So, the Kingslayer challenge for Oryx is... you have to kill him in one damage phase. The way you do that is you want to make sure that you go, just to play it safe, at least 3 rounds, potentially 4 rounds, if you really want to be sure, without actually shooting him at all, and just detonating 1 bomb at a time to make sure he doesn't wipe you. And so that way, in the 4th round, you'll detonate 13 bombs. The amount of bombs you detonate actually extend the timer that you have for damage. So it'll give you a super long damage phase. And then finally, The other challenge for the double loot is actually the toughest challenge of all of them, especially in Master. And what it is that you cannot kill the same ogre or knight throughout the entire raid more than once. So everybody kind of has to rotate, and then your 2 floaters have to kill the 2 at the end, which we forgot to mention, Final Stand did get an update as well. Instead of just shooting Oryx and it's over, you now actually do have more bombs to detonate at the end. Usually you only need 1, but there are 2 if needed. So just stagger them, do 1 at a time. And so that's the challenges. And I did also want to quickly mention the champion layout for Master. So we already mentioned on Glyphs. On War Priest, the knights that are for the glyph reading are barrier knights. And then whenever you get to the Taken phase, they switch to Overload Hobgoblins. During Golgoroth, the knights that spawn during ad waves are barrier knights. That's it. It really doesn't change the encounter at all. For Daughters, again, the knights on the platforms, barrier knights. And then for Oryx, the knights are completely not the light bearer, not the bomb stealing knights, but the knights that spawn on the plates at the beginning of the encounter and during Oryx's Reign of Terror are Overload Hobgoblins now. So keep that in mind as you go through the raid on Master. That's sort of the complete breakdown of the raid. This is my favorite raid, and it's clearly one of Nate's favorite raids. We love running this raid as a clan. Like I said, we've run it every week. We all have full-time jobs, so we don't always get to run a whole bunch of raids every week, so we always make sure to do King's Fall because it is the current pinnacle one.
I'll say this, it's one of those raids that when you go into it like fresh, it's definitely overwhelming. But the more you do it, the better you get at it, and the faster you get at it. I think one time we did it within an hour.
Yes, yes.
And basically, it boils down to practice makes perfect for this raid.
Nate's absolutely right.
You have a group of friends that does it, and you just do it over and over again. It becomes a lot simpler.
Yep, that's absolutely perfect. I mean, there's so many mechanics, it does seem literally impossible at first. And I would say, when it comes to mechanics, this is one of the harder raids. But you practice it, you get it down pat. The good thing is the mechanics, they're not sporadic. Okay, like they are going to be what they are every time. And because of that, you can really nail it and get your time down like Nate was saying.
You're never going to be cheated by the mechanics.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It never feels like you're just getting screwed over completely. It's really smooth, and I think that's one of the strongest parts about it. So moving on from that breakdown, and great advice there from Nate, we now have the weapons to talk about. Bungie has said now when they do a reprised raid that what they do is they choose the 6 most popular, most used raid weapons from D1 and reboot them for D2. So the 6 raid weapons that we have all have an origin trait that is new called Runneth Over. This is a fantastic origin trait when you're doing team-based activities, especially 6-player activities like raids. Because what it means, and this stacks up to 5 times, based on the number of teammates near you, reloading will overflow your magazine. You can get some crazy combos with this. Because if you use backup mag as a mod too, you can get a scout rifle with like 30 shots in the magazine, for example, or a pulse rifle with like 90. Like, it's pretty insane.
That's kind of nutty how much you can get in one mag.
Yes, it is, and it's really good on the heavy machine gun. It's really good on the heavy machine gun for that reason. So let's go ahead and start there. Let's start with the heavy machine gun. Nate, you're the machine gun expert. What do you think of the Quillam's Terminus?
I like it. I think it's definitely unique being stasis. There's not a whole lot of stasis weapons out there. I just wish there was kind of better rolls that they could have on it.
Yeah.
But it's not bad. I think it's probably one of the weaker raid weapons, to be honest about it.
Yeah, I could definitely see that making sense for sure. It does feel like it is probably one of the weaker ones. I only really use it during Golgoroth to take out Axion
I think
darts.
a lot of that is we probably need another machine gun buff.
Yeah, Thunderlord's really the only one that holds up.
Yep.
I mean, I use my Swarm for GMs, but that's only because Overload machine gun.
Yeah, and it does not. Normal machine guns by themselves do not put out a lot of damage. Why Thunderlord is so redeemable is because of its lightning it does, and its new catalyst they added reloads it while you're firing it.
Right. All right, so
that makes it much more reliable.
And as we move on from the heavy slot, in the energy slot, that's the only heavy slot weapon we have. For the energy slot weapons, we do have quite a few. So we've got Mida's Reckoning, first of all, which is a very high impact fusion rifle. Have you used this at all, Nate?
To be honest with you, I kind of delete it every time I get it.
Yeah, and that's fair. I've used it a little bit, my Harrowed version, and this archetype just it doesn't really have a place in the game right now.
It's not a good archetype.
Yeah, it's not. It's a little too slow. However, if Arc Burn is on and you're doing something that's not incredibly difficult, feel free to go in with PvE and have some fun with this, because it does hit like a truck. You can actually get 100 impact on this thing. And so it's very powerful. It's just not great in PvP or anything like that because of its slow charge time. And I wouldn't really bring it into in-game content necessarily. But, you know... Oh, sorry, I got out of my chair because my PlayStation was going to go into rest mode. Let me sit back down. So, Mida's Reckoning, you know, not the best. Maybe not the worst fusion rifle in the game, but not the best. And this is where we start getting into the absolute bangers. Okay? Doom of Chelkitz, a Void Scout Rifle. I think this weapon is incredibly strong, especially with Runneth Over. And if you get Explosive Payload, there's also what everybody's calling the meme roll, where you can actually roll Dragonfly and Firefly on this thing.
Of that.
Which is a hilarious roll, and it's actually quite effective.
I like it a lot. I think it's cool.
We didn't really have too many good Void Scouts, so I think this one was a win all around. I definitely think it's a weapon that is worth farming for, worth crafting, worth getting the Adept version. It's a great weapon. And then we move on to my favorite weapon in the raid, which is none other than the Zali's Bane hand cannon. This has very quickly become my favorite legendary weapon in the game. And if you guys remember this gun in Destiny 1, it was
trash.
Yes, it had a horrible reload time. That is no longer the case. The reload time is perfectly manageable, and now it can roll things like Stats for All, One for All, Incandescent. It can roll
Incandescent on it.
Yes, it can roll Explosive Payload.
Mine is Explosive Payload Incandescent, so it's like a legendary Sunshot.
That is a fantastic roll, Nate. Very good roll. Mine is, I believe, my Herald one has like One for All and Explosive Payload, which because I'm not using a solar class, it definitely works out fine with that. I like that loadout. I like that roll. Explosive Payload is really a must on this because it just increases damage tremendously. I love this weapon. It's a solar hand cannon now instead of just a kinetic one like in D1, so it does have more use in that category as well. Sometimes for fun in PvE, I'll even use this and Last Word and just double hand cannon for the fun of it, and it's a lot of fun. So I think this weapon's a 10 out of 10. A lot of people are under the impression this is the best legendary hand cannon in the game, and I agree with that. The perk combinations are just nearly game-breaking. I mean, Explosive Payload Incandescent, Explosive Payload One for All Stats for All. Those are all amazing perk combinations you can get to the point.
If you get the crafted enhanced versions, it becomes even better.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, you can get enhanced on all your perks, and this is definitely the first weapon I would go for. Then we move to the kinetic slot, where we have Smite of Moraine, which is really hit or miss for people. I've heard a lot of pulse rifle enthusiasts say it's actually really good. Nate, I know you're not a fan of the way this weapon handles.
I just don't like pulse rifles in general, and especially when you have a pulse rifle like this, it's not a bad gun, and I think it can get some decent rolls. It's a slow firing pulse rifle, and I really don't like those.
Yeah, fair enough. It probably has its place. If you're a pulse rifle enthusiast, I'm sure you'll have some love for it, but we're not really experts on the weapon archetype in general. So my advice would just be to get this weapon and try it out. And that brings me to my second favorite King's Fall weapon, the Defiance of Yasmin Sniper. I absolutely love this sniper. It gives me a good kinetic option for my sniper when I'm not using 1,000-yard stare in my energy slot. And it's really good. I mean, the rolls are pretty standard. Of course, it has snapshot, that kind of thing. You probably want triple tap on a PvE version. It looks awesome. It sounds awesome. And of course, the most important thing about handling is target acquisition and the general feel of the scope. And I think that's where this weapon really strives. It just feels really smooth, really powerful. It's snappy, especially if you get snapshot on there. And I just think it's overall a really good choice to go with. Those are my thoughts on the King's Fall Sniper, and that sort of summarizes all of the legendary weapons. I do also love the Hunter armor set. I am wearing most of it as we speak. The Titan armor set can look a little silly sometimes, but it's not the worst thing in the world. And then the Warlock armor set, I think, looks pretty cool. And that leaves the only other thing to talk about, which is unfortunately something that me and Nate have been too unlucky to get, but that is Touch of Malice, the fabled raid exotic, which, if I'm not mistaken, the main changes they made is that it now buffs other weapons of sorrow, like Malfeasance and Thorn, and it can also now shoot a taken Captain Blast under certain circumstances. But other than that, it's same old as in Destiny 1, where the last shot never runs out, but it actually takes your health away to shoot it. Primary PvE damage is low enough these days that it's not nearly as broken as it was in Destiny 1. Like, in Destiny 1, it was a legitimate DPS option. I don't think that's the case now, but it is still really cool. It's a novelty weapon. It's cool that it has Oryx's heart in it, and I hope to get it very soon.
It's just that they need to change raid exotic drop rates or something.
Yeah, I completely agree. They are way too rare. I mean, way too rare. And that is sort of our, breakdown of the King's Fall weapons, the King's Fall encounters, the challenges. The other things that the seal requires you to do is to get all the hidden chests, which you can easily look up. It requires you to do all the challenges we mentioned and then do the double loot challenges in master mode as well. It also requires you to complete the raid with a full team of clanmates, to complete the raid with a full team of the same class, and then to complete a raid with a fire team of Solar, a fire team of Void, a fire team of Arc, as well as just complete the raid on Master and complete the raid normally. And I believe that is sort of the final steps on our path to getting the Kingslayer title, which, like I said, I've been more than happy to complete. Now, you guys, I think that is going to pretty much do it for this first episode of the podcast. I mean, King's Fall is a glorious raid. I think it's a very strong raid, a raid that I will always hold in high regard, and it's one that I hope you guys enjoy as much as I do. This is Autobot Dawson rolling out, and I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. Long live the King.